Okay, if I can call the room to order, please. This is the 29th of June. It's the company's committee. The agenda packs are in front of you. If we can have mobile phones off or on silent, please. Item 1, apologies for absence. Alice, apologies for absence, please.
There have been no apologies for absence, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Item 2, disclosures of interest. Are there any disclosures of interest in the room? As a reminder, you can disclose interests at any stage during the meeting. Okay, moving on. Item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of February. Are there any comments on the minutes? Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chairman. I know I'm not a committee member for the company, for the committee. However, where it does refer to members as company directors, obviously it's listed a number of people there. I just wonder if we could also put in the other companies just for absolute clarity in these minutes, because I know in the agenda pack in the minutes, Gravitas Housing was also mentioned briefly, and obviously I am also a director of Gravitas Housing, so I think just for absolute clarity, just to list the various companies would be useful.
Thank you. Are there any other comments on the minutes? Okay, do I have a proposer that that's a true and accurate record of that meeting? Thank you, Councillor Stokes. Do you have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Whittington. All those in favour that this is a true and accurate record of that meeting? Anyone against? Okay, I'm grateful for that. That's and one two abstentions. Okay, those minutes are carried. Moving on, updates from the previous meeting, item 4. Do we have any comments on the updates from the previous meeting, item 4?
Sorry.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. We said in the minutes of the last meeting that we were going to bring forward the Leisure SK to this meeting. It's been deferred to September, not entirely sure why. I wonder if you could explain.
I'm grateful for your comments. We do have some questions that are going to be answered as between points 4 and 5 to inform the work plan, because as you say, a number of questions arose in the last few months. But I would suggest that question as to why we've not received a full report is asked then, and when we're to expect a full report. But we are going to have questions answered then. Thank you. Are there any other comments on the updates from previous meetings? Okay, I'd like to make some progress then. So moving back to that last point, we're going to receive a verbal update, please. I'll hand this over to Councillor Cook. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is just a verbal update in respect of Invest SK. So the Council's corporate plan makes clear delivering growth of the economy is fundamental to the success of the district, its businesses and residents. We are therefore prioritising protecting and creating jobs within the district, developing the centres and high streets of our 4 market towns, securing investment for infrastructure to support ongoing and sustainable growth. Members will recall that in 2017, Invest SK was established as a private company limited by guarantee. Currently, there are 3 directors. I was appointed as chairman on the 5th of September 2019. Councillor Barry-Dobson was appointed as director on the 7th of November 2019. And the Council's Chief Executive, Karen Bradford, was the most recently appointed director on the 25th of March 2020. Business plans have been put in place, with the new business plan being presented last year, amid much praise on the newly adopted template to this committee, as I'm sure we can all remember when we met virtually. Financial statements for Invest SK for the year ended the 31st of March 2020, which comprised the income statement, balance sheets and notes to the financial statements, were duly submitted on time. I appreciate there's a question upcoming on that one. The Invest SK mission remains ambitious, which is to embrace and promote South Kesteven's considerable strengths, such as its rich heritage, visitor economy, educational offer, distinctive market towns, lively arts and culture scene, and diverse talent pool. Recent successes include securing just shy of £7 million from the central government, including the £5.56 million for the Grantham Future High Street funding, which will result in a new gateway to the town centre from Grantham train station, and also the £1.25 million for the Grantham High Street Heritage Action Zone to re-establish the special character and vitality of the town centre. I know that Heritage England have been very impressed with that work so far, and they are using us and particularly Grantham as an exemplar at the present time. Throughout the pandemic, Invest SK, by working seamlessly with the council, has played a pivotal role in supporting our businesses across the district. A total now of over £51 million of COVID business support grants being distributed by Invest SK to over 3,000 businesses in the district. This was a significant undertaking for which the Invest SK team deserve acknowledgement and appreciation from this council, especially how promptly they did deliver some of those grants to those businesses really in need. The Invest SK team have given extensive business advice and support. Communication and engagement with the business community has been second to none, with the Invest SK tea breaks routinely welcoming nearly up to 70 members at each of those meetings. The recent announcement regarding the delay in lockdown easing has caused a significant spike in activity regarding COVID business grants. Whilst no additional funding is being made available, new guidance on the use of the additional restrictions grant, or the ARG funding, and supporting those sectors that continue to be affected by the restrictions have been received, and new schemes are now under development. And what I would say, and I think I've said to all my parish councils that I represent, if you do know businesses that were exempt from previous levels of support, please get them to get in touch with Invest SK, because we have got that ARG, and at the end of I think it's March next year, if we haven't spent it, that money will be requested back by government. So either we spend it locally here on the businesses that need the support, or it will go back. And as businesses reopen across South Kesteven, attention will rightly focus on what Invest SK are doing to assist firms boost footfall and help bring much needed spending to our towns and village centres, and of course that remains our focus. Last month, the council welcomed our new Director of Growth and Culture, Nicola McCoy-Brown, who's providing senior leadership of strategic growth, inward investments and investment opportunities. Among the targets set for Nicola is to work with the Invest SK manager to jointly review the operating model to ensure this best reflects the local needs of the area and in attracting inward investment to the area. As ultimately, what we all desire is an effective economic development and growth team for our district, promoting the wider area and delivering growth into it and investment. And that's just a brief verbal update for you, Chairman.
Okay, are there any questions? Any questions on that update? Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. 3 questions. Firstly, you refer to the council working seamlessly with Invest SK. For me, and I'm sure for others, it is so seamless at times that you can't tell where one begins or one ends and the next one begins. And it seems that some of the things that used to be Invest SK are now back within the council. How would one find where the line is? How would one define where the line is? Because personally, I've tried to get some information from Invest SK, and it seems that our own officers at times have been unclear which information belongs to South Kesteven District Council and which information belongs to Invest SK. That's my first question. The second question is there any update on the St Martin's Park project? And my third question is about the submission of the company accounts. I mistakenly looked at I looked at the Company's House website, which mistakenly said that the accounts were overdue, which I acknowledge they were not. However, we called Invest SK called auditors in August, and the accounts were not submitted until the very last day before the deadline, March the 30th. Can you explain the delay between the auditors and the submission of the accounts, please? Thank you.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chairman. So I'll deal with the last point first then. So in relation to the Invest SK accounts. So following board members' approval of the accounts in May 2020, external auditors were instructed by the previous Invest SK chief executive in August of 2020. At the time of the instruction to the auditors, Invest SK were very heavily involved in the administration of COVID-19 support grants to businesses. At its peak, this involved dealing with over 200 inquiries a day from businesses needing support and grant funding. The Invest SK manager liaised regularly with the auditors in providing the requested information, which was often paper-based evidence of invoices, payments made and received. And given the paperwork was in the Invest SK offices at St Peter's Hill, there was obviously times during the November and January lockdowns that accessing the office was not possible or much more difficult than it would normally be, and this inevitably caused delays in response times. At all times, meeting the intended date for submission of the 30th of March remained the aim, and despite the huge upturn in grants work as a result of the second and third national lockdowns, the continued delivery of the Heritage Zone project, submission of the future High Street bid, the submission of the accounts was achieved by the deadline. I think all I would finally say on that one is, we do have in Invest SK a small, and it is a small dedicated team. They were obviously dealing with the pandemic, and the focus was on getting those business grants out to the support the businesses that needed it. In terms of the first question, yes, I think as I said in my verbal update, obviously Nicola is going to be working with the Invest SK manager to jointly review the operating model to ensure that best reflects the working between both the council and the company, and also looking at a post-pandemic world as to how that operating model should be and what that should look like. So obviously that will come to play later this year, and obviously I'll look forward to updating companies committee on that. I'm not aware of the various information that you're requesting. Obviously we can ensure that officers of both sides of the council and of Invest SK are aware of where the lines of responsibility are within the council. Obviously when Invest SK was launched, certain elements were put into Invest SK. I think then when I became chairman, I took the decision at the time, and obviously council made the budget decision to move various aspects of that back to council operations, particularly some of the management of the arts, and certain individuals that were working for Invest SK have returned or have gone to the council. But obviously we can make sure that those lines are really clear. I don't regret anything that the teams were doing in terms of close working between the council and Invest SK over the last 15, 18 months. They needed to work closely together. They've delivered a fantastic job, and I can't criticise what they've done. In terms of St Martin's Park, it's not directly a company or a Invest SK responsibility. Obviously, the St Martin's Park project is going incredibly well. We've got the buyers lined up for the various aspects of the site. There was a last bit of feasibility work to do with the planning application. Obviously, I hope it goes to planning very shortly, and then the demolition will start after that. But the relationship with Burley Land Limited, who's the partner on that scheme, is moving ahead very well, and I'm looking forward to that scheme starting hopefully later this year.
Okay. Just to clarify a couple of points that Councillor Baxter raised there. So firstly, you're confirming there are no issues in governance that should concern this committee about submissions of accounts, although they were submitted on time. There are no issues of governance. Secondly, it was sort of suggested in the point referring to South Stephen and ISK that the business plan is under review at the moment, and that there's a process of review. The two questions that begs is, when will that report to this committee, and are all options being considered in that review process?
So just to answer, so no, there was no issues with governance. There was no issues with the accounts either. In terms of operational activities, there's no intended change of the business plan at the present time. In terms of options on the table, and I know this has been mentioned to me before, the ultimate goal is we want a really effective and productive economic development and growth team. Now, whether that sits outside of the council in a company called Invest SK, or the potential of it being an economic development team inside the council, and it's still branded Invest SK. The brand of Invest SK is never going to go anywhere, but how that operates, I've asked Nicola and John to look into, and obviously we'll be coming back to the companies committee with that review. Now, that's not to say that within the next 5 minutes I want to see tweets saying that Kellam's bringing back Invest SK into the council, because that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we are looking at all options, and I'll obviously be looking forward to updating you on that information.
And just before we come, the timing of that updating, we're expecting that when?
We're looking at autumn. I'd like to get it bottomed out by the end of this year.
Right. Councillor Whittington.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. I just want to just something that came up in response to the leader's reply to that, because we seem to have a situation where we don't think the business plan is being changed, but we do know that in terms of funding this year, Invest SK receiving less funding than in previous years. So how can we have I'm just unsure about how having reduced budget means we can still deliver on the business plan. Just some clarity around that would be useful, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Cook.
Well, obviously the funding was announced prior to I think the final business plan being created. So obviously the business plan will work to the budget and the funding that Invest SK has available to it. And obviously will be marked and reported against that business plan to you as a committee.
Are there any other comments and questions on that update? Okay, there was a commitment there to bring a more detailed report back to us in the autumn. I'll certainly work with John to ensure that that's into the work plan. The next item on the agenda is the work plan, although I suggest we leave that till last. So I'd like to circle back to that till last, just because other things may come up in the meeting that inform the work plan. So I'm going to skip over item 5, please, and move on to Environment SK. Would you prefer us to exclude press and public first, or do you want to give some initial comments before we go through that process? Councillor Mosley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I'm happy to deliver the report. If the committee would like to stray into discussing the pink papers, then obviously we'll need to head into into private session. Should we play it by ear?
My preference is that there's always as much in public as possible, but obviously if you feel that we're heading into commercially sensitive territory, then certainly we shall move towards excluding press and public. But my preference is the majority, as much as you can in public session, please. Councillor Mosley.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I agree with you there. Thank you for inviting Environment SK here today. To present once again to your committee. The one thing I'll just draw your attention to straight away is that the report was written by Ian Yates, and Ian Yates is now retired. And I would just like to take this opportunity to thank him for all of the work he did as a director of Environment SK and for the council over his many years of service, and wish him well in his retirement. His name will crop up later within the report anyway. So what we're doing here today is we're just giving you an update on where we are with Environment SK, and obviously in the light of the retirement of Ian Yates, we would like to seek the support of the committee for the proposed changes to the directorships as detailed in the report. Now, as we all know, it's been a very challenging year. And we came to this committee, I think almost a year ago, maybe a bit longer, I think. Can't quite remember, with our business plan, but we've gone through quite a significant upheaval as a nation during that period, and I'm delighted to say that Environment SK has provided some flexibility for the council during that time, so that we've been able to use its staff, for example, in bubbles and the like, to keep all of our key services running. We've also obviously been able to make sure that our parks and gardens and open spaces are well cared for, so that people enjoying their outdoor time have been able to do so throughout the district nicely. Obviously, we presented within our business plan some projections with regards to sales. Broadly speaking, they've been met, although there have been some movement around. So, for example, where companies, where private commercial companies were perhaps furloughed or shut down during the pandemic, we saw that income drop off, but we saw private domestic income actually rise. So we've been able to adapt as a business to approach all aspects of the grounds maintenance offer that we have, and meet and exceed the targets that we set for. I think we'd predicted a 952,000 sales target. I think we're about 960, I think. Although we've yet to finalise the accounts, they're just heading off to the accountant as we speak. We're now heading into almost year 3 of our operation, and we're in this transition period now, working with the council to make sure that we develop a programme of work which is fit for the future and which no longer reflects the old way and the old contract, which was very wieldy and difficult to operate. So we've done some very good benchmarking within the business, and now we're working with officers at the council to make sure that we fit our grounds maintenance offering as a council within the budget with Environment SK. It's important to point out that if we take £1 worth of money out, we take £1 worth of work out. And that's the way that it works with the relationship between the two. But I'm very pleased that the council and Environment SK are working well with that. There have been very successful sales during the year. We've picked up quite a lot of parish council work and public sector work in that respect, but also the private commercial is coming back on stream. So I'm optimistic for the future. And I think that the business has performed very well during the challenging time that we've had. We always look at ways which we can improve, and we'll continue to do that. We're looking at new ways of operating, new equipment that we can use that generates more sales, that's more appropriate to different customers, and that's an ongoing process. And we're very lucky as a business to have with us Doug Rogers as our operations director, who's taken over from Keith Rowe. He's worked his way up through the business. He's got a significant amount of experience with in the grounds maintenance business, and he's running that ship operationally very, very effectively. So I'm very pleased with that. And so I move on to the director changes. We would propose that on the retirement of Ian Yates, that he resigns as a normal director, and it's proposed that Ken Lyons, the Assistant Chief Executive SKDC, becomes a Director of Environment SK. Obviously, Ken's got a huge amount of experience behind him, being Head of Commercialism at Birmingham City Council, for example, and we would like him to sit on the board. And we'd also like to offer Ian Yates, after he's had a little bit of a break, a non-executive directorship at Environment SK. The one thing that I've learned over the years of working with Ian, especially with Environment SK, he has a huge amount of contacts within the public sector, as well as the private sector that he's developed over the 30 years that he's been working here. And his knowledge and contacts have been invaluable within that. He's currently, got very close ties with people within the grounds maintenance industry, and he's introduced a lot of those to us as we've moved forward. So I'll leave it there, because I've touched nothing on the pink paper there, and open it up for questions. And if we want to stray into more detail, then we can take a view, if that's all right with you, Mr. Chairman.
So what I propose is that we take questions on the report first, and then we move into discussing the pink papers separately. So on the report, reminding that we're in public session, do we have any questions from the committee? Councillor Ian Stokes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes. Looking at the financial update, how accurate is the forecast for year 2 as opposed to the target? Because it's slightly different in more ways than one. The income's down and the expenditure's up on the forecast. So obviously the operating surplus will be less. Fortunately, that might have any bearing on the tax implications, which will be a good thing because there'll be less to pay.
Yeah, I mean, there will be some slight movement, but not an appreciable amount with regards to that, because I mean we are at end of year, so we've rounded those around. I mean, you're right. The council spent less on its contract. Private commercials took a big hit, as I described earlier, where businesses shut down and during the pandemic. But equally, private, domestic, and public sector have been very good for us during that period. So although our target was 952 in total sales, we've exceeded that by 8k, and we think that's more or less about right. But the cost of sales and admin obviously has gone up. Because we've had to operate in bubbles, for example. That means that productivity has changed the way that we work with regards to that. I would anticipate that as we move out of COVID restrictions and we're able to operate more normally as a business, that will alter, and we'll see a change back next year to a more normal cost of sales, if you like. Does that, I hope that answers your question?
Councillor Whittington.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think my question is very much related to the question that Councillor Stokes has just asked, because if you look at the cost of sales percentage to income for the year 1 actuals is 93%. The year 2 target is 93%. The year 2 forecast goes to 97.5%. Thereby indicating there's increase in cost of sales in the year 2 forecast, which I think the reasons for that you've just referred to. So part of my question, I think, has been asked by that. But in terms of looking at some of the other numbers, obviously just look at the council contract with SKDC. In year one, the actual was just over £1 million. And we're forecasting is dropping to 850 in year two. And there's some other sort of differences there as well. I'm just wondering if you've sort of, I mean, I can appreciate with some of the private work we're doing, the contract values probably will alter and change, as you take on new clients or maybe existing clients go. But just sort of, I just struggling to understand that, how this, in some of these, there's such big movements because I'd have thought that if you've had contract, you won't just be doing contracts for 1 year, you'll be doing them on a more recurrent basis. Why some of the income figures have altered by quite as much as they have? Thank you.
Right, in terms of the SKDC work, there currently isn't an open contract. There's no contract. What we did was when we started Environment SK, we had an agreement in year one that we would maintain the contract that Glendale had because we wanted to transition all of the staff, all of that knowledge, et cetera, into Environment SK. Year two, there's no such agreement, and really, Environment SK is dictated by what the client budgets. Okay, so we're just providing to the budget of the council work that's done. So if the council wants to reduce its budget, which it does, then we react to that, and that does actually have an impact, because if we hear about that, if there's movement in year, for example, very generally isn't, but we might have to adjust. For example, when COVID came in, we were obviously supporting the council in many ways. In terms of sending staff over to do waste services and the like. When things change with regards to the work that you do on the grounds, Environment SK then has to react and then staff accordingly. And it's doing that, actually. I mean, you'll see, when you move into pink papers, that a huge amount of the cost of running the business is staff. And we're very sensitive to that. So I think what this shows is that we're delivering. It's really up to the client what they budget as to what we say. So if they want to, if any of our private clients want to reduce their budget, that's going to have an impact on it. And we might not find out. We'll find out with the council. We'll find out in advance. But with private commercial customers, they might turn around the next month and say, "Well, we don't need that much doing this month," and that'll have an impact. So when we're forecasting and when we're budgeting, that's best guess. There will be movement because we have to react to our customers, but I'd like to think that we've reacted very well to them. Because when they've decided that they don't want to do anything, there's been no quibble. It's about keeping the door open, being helpful, and this extends itself across the commercial work that we do. A prime example would be the commercial waste service, for example. We were very flexible on that, and I think that's, as a business, that's what you need to be, because at some point those customers are going to come back online, and you want to be sat there keeping in touch, ready for them when they're ready to work with them and help them move forwards.
Thanks for that. I wasn't aware of how it worked, but that's given me a lot of information. Thanks much indeed.
Thank you. Councillor Sandal.
Thank you. In your report, you state that you reduce your workforce. As you know, that Stamford Town Council approached you and we agreed a contract for this year, and we haven't been very happy with the work. And we appreciate the fact that it's very long. We've had a very growing rainy season, but the work commenced on June the 4th. It is now June the 29th, and it still hasn't been completed. I just wondered whether you could not complete the work that we asked you to do, whether perhaps you would have considered just saying so, and we would have gone back with our original contractors. Thank you.
Councillor Mosley.
Okay, well, you were discussing a private contract in an SKDC public meeting, but what I will say is that Stamford Town Council did not provide a purchase order to Environment SK until the 4th of June. And that's the point at which we started engaging on that contract. And I believe that we're on time and on schedule to provide one cut a month for 4 months as agreed. Simple as that.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 4. So you might need a pen. First of all, I think you've answered the first one, which was about the cost to the council. Am I reading paragraph 3.1 correctly in that the cost of grounds maintenance to the council has fallen by roughly £150,000 a year? If so, that's great news.
Councillor Mosley.
Those are the figures of what we've got from the council for work to do. Yeah. So the council have reduced their budget. Yeah. You will see though that will reduce the service as well. So if you think that's a good thing, that's fine. Some people disagree with you, others don't. You know, but you know, £1 worth of work, £1 worth taken out is £1 worth of work not done. So that reduction is a reduction in service as well as cost.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. I don't necessarily agree, because the whole point of Environment SK is working smarter and working better and having a more flexible contractor and so on. But it's a moot point, I think. Why am I making a noise? We have got a fall in our expenditure. Part of that, I guess, would be down to COVID, or is it? I'm not sure. Secondly, my second question is, there's a training need, and I wondered if you would like to comment on the training of staff in issues of broad environmentalism and also specific environmentalism, because I've had complaints from residents about Environment SK allegedly cutting trees and hedges during bird nesting season, and I've seen in the press that Environment SK have had issues with over-enthusiastic strimmers. I think in Grantham Park, we've had strimming incidents that have happened way more than once, possibly more than 4 or 5 times.
Can you ask all of your questions, Councillor Baxter, and then we'll get a fuller response. Thank you.
Yeah, so training in the use of equipment and environmental issues generally. Thirdly, this report, which is welcome, and obviously it's a business-like report, says very little about the climate change agenda, biodiversity and environmental issues, and that stuff should be baked in. I think it should be clear to anyone reading anything about Environment SK or SKDC that we are a council with climate change ambition or carbon neutral ambition, and so it would be great to see an extra paragraph or other information within this report showing how Environment SK is tackling the environment, climate change and biodiversity agenda head on. And finally, you talk about advertising. So this might be more a question for either the monitoring officer or Richard Wiles, but the work has already been undertaken to utilise the council's SK Today magazine. Are we advertising an external company in a council document? If the council is paying for the document, then I'm nervous about putting an advert for a private company in it. I just would like some clarification about the rules. Thank you.
Councillor Mosley.
Apologies. Right, we'll start off with your training. I'm aware of the issues that you're referring to. I have a different side of your particular picture with regards to that. I'm not going to discuss it in here because it's an operational matter, but I say you're quite a way off the mark with regards to that. In terms of training of staff, all of our staff have ongoing training with regards to operation of equipment. Environment SK staff are basically doing work that they are employed to do. And I believe that they're doing it well. We have far more compliments than we have complaints. And I'm very pleased about that, because I think years ago, as a council, all we ever got were complaints. But Environment SK has a very good number of compliments coming. In terms of biodiversity, Environment SK is a business which is employed to do work that its customers want. If its customers want biodiversity work done, Environment SK has the skills to achieve that. But it's for the council to suggest that it wants more biodiversity within, and then Environment SK will provide that service to them. Yeah. And if you look at our operations director, for example, the experience that he brings is very welcome with regards to. In fact, there's a paragraph in here with regards to his qualifications in wildlife management, for example, grounds maintenance services to enhance open spaces, create woodland edge habitat, and all of that kind of thing. So we have people within the business who are capable of delivering that if the client wants it, but it's up to the client to employ us to do it. If the client employs us to do it, we'll do it. And the advertising, we put a one-page promotional in 1SK today, but we also advertise in local links that we pay for and all sorts of things like that as well. We just demonstrated that we've promoted our company and the existence of our company to our residents, who are effectively the taxpayers for the shareholder.
Councillor Baxter.
Could I just come back quickly and say that I meant to say during that list of questions that on the biodiversity agenda, while we were with the previous contractor, I was trying for years to get any kind of creative approach to managing biodiversity within my ward, and struggling. And since Environment SK have come along, at the instruction of the client, the Environment Committee, the cabinet member even, that has now happened, and it looks absolutely gorgeous at the top of Tattershall Drive. Environment SK have done it properly, and it looks like it's supposed to be there, which is a real step forward. So I don't think we should be afraid of shouting about how good we are at, or how good Environment SK is at doing this agenda. There should be more of it. Thanks.
Any other questions? Councillor Knowles.
Thank you. I don't make a big point of it, but at the town council we have had some complaints about both the method of operation and the wet mess that was left after some accounts cutting. I don't want to make a big fuss of it now, but if you kindly get one of your staff, so senior staff, to talk to our chairman of amenities, then he could be more specific, because he was aware of these things, and it's to improve the general service. That's what we all want, isn't it?
Well, I think you're right to raise individual comments, but I think in answers to those individual private contracts probably need to be supplied in written form outside of this meeting, actually. Do you want to comment on that briefly?
Yeah, I mean, it's really important to hear, things go right a lot. Sometimes things don't go right. And it's really important to hear those things and react to them. The one thing that I'll point out to everybody, I mean, we've had a bit of a perfect storm this spring because of a very late bolt of grass, and I'm sure we know every contractor's had an issue with this, because the grass grows longer, it takes longer to cut it. There's more, we don't do a cut and collect service on green open spaces, so whatever gets cut gets left. And then of course it looks odd until it's mulched in the next time. And of course, because of that, some of the schedules run a little bit late. So you might end up at the end of the day where they perhaps haven't cleared and blown back what they should have done. The team works really hard to make sure that it delivers a really good service, and by and large it does. But I still want to hear when it doesn't, and who to go and talk to make sure that if there's things not quite working right, we'll make them work right. Because I mean, the focus of Environment SK is quality service and value for money. I don't want to see any of those drop. I believe we're doing really well. Yeah, when you look at the 365 square miles of South Kesteven, and then look at all of the additional work that we're doing as well, which is great for the business. We have to make sure that we keep on top of those core priorities. So anything that we can do with regards to feedback, I'm happy to take on board. But that does steer more into the operational area than we would normally like with the company's committee. But thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Are there any other questions on the report? Okay, I have a couple of questions. Just clarifying point that Councillor Baxter arose about the advert in SK today. Was there a chargeback associated with that? Was there a commercial payment between Environment SK and the council on that?
I don't believe so. No. It's enclosed in Appendix 3, so it just shows and it promotes promotes the work that we do for the council, and lets people know that we're available for private work as well. But I don't believe that there was any charge made for that.
Okay, members will take different views on that, I think. Moving on to the directors, what was the selection process for selecting Mr. Rogers? And also with Ken Lyons, we know Ken. What's his role? You implied that he's going to be brought in as a sales director. Is there a specific sales director role? What I'm getting at is who's driving sales? Is it Ken? And if it's not Ken, what is Ken doing? What's his role? And who is the sales director? Who's driving the sales?
Right, okay. Doug Rogers, I'll start with Doug. Doug was employed as a business development manager under Keith Rowe a couple of years ago. So he is a salesman by trade. And he worked his way up. When Keith left the business, we trialed Doug in the operations role. He's excelled at that. He's backfilled his position with another salesman. Yeah. So we've got a guy sat there selling all day, every day, and doing the customer relationship management. The role of the director is to be a director, to direct the business strategically. So the work that I do, for example, and Mark Jones and Ken Lyon would do, is to steer the strategic direction of the business. I'm not expecting Ken Lyon to be a salesman. He's the assistant director of the assistant chief exec of SKDC, but he can play his experience and knowledge with how the public sector can operate commercially from his work with Birmingham, can provide a really valuable tool to help us make that relationship between public and private sector work. It's an ongoing challenge, that is, and it's one that that we do work really, really hard to try and achieve. So I hope that explains the choice of Doug to step up following Keith in terms of the operational management of the business, and the fact that there's a sales function beneath him.
It does. I think that's an important clarification, because you suggested in your presentation that it was the other way around, that Ken was being brought in for sales. But actually, that's fine. So Doug will be driving sales, will he? Yeah? With the person that reports directly to him.
Yeah, Doug is the salesman's line manager. Doug manages all of the operations of the business. So he's got guys that, obviously he works with his supervisors to make sure the guys are out doing the work, that all of the work that we're contracted to do is done. And then there's obviously, we've got some back office staff, I think we've got one back office staff, and then we've got a salesman, and then Doug. And that's the operation of the business, and it's working really well, actually. The one thing that I will point out is it's very difficult to, we're lucky that we've got the sales function working well with ESK, but it's a constant battle to make sure we retain staff. In the particular environment we're in at the moment, a lot of people who are furloughed have taken work doing things they wouldn't normally do, and we're expecting that come September, when those people perhaps then are unfurloughed and move back to their work, that'll provide us with, that might cause us an issue. But we're going to react to that. I mean, we're a business at the end of the day. We've got to be agile, like all businesses are, and react to the challenges that come our way. And I'm sure we'll do that.
Okay. Does any other committee members have any other questions about this report, or specifically the proposed changes of directorships? Councillor Whittington.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I do have one question, but it's pertinent to the pink papers. So
we'll move on to the pink papers in a moment. Does anybody have any? Okay, would anybody request a vote on the changes in directorships, or are we just happy to work with that? I don't think anybody's requesting a vote. So other than to say it would be nice to meet Mr. Rogers at some stage in the future, just to understand the sales strategy. I would like to move on to the pink papers. So that requires me to read some gumph. Okay, under section 100, 8.A.4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public may be excluded from the meeting during any listed items of business on the grounds that they were to be present. Exempt information could be disclosed to them as defined in the relevant paragraphs of Schedule 12A of the Act. Do you have a proposer for this? Thank you, Councillor Sandal. Do I have a seconder? All those in favour? Any against? Okay, that has been, and any abstentions?